Good afternoon. We're going to cover the watch list for this coming week, which is December 23rd. Before we get into that, we're going to just want to mention that Tuesday is a half a day. The market will close at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Wednesday is Christmas, so we closed all day. And so it will be a short week. I don't think too much will happen. But I just want to remind last year, the market had a deep sell-off and it reversed on Christmas Eve. So don't be surprised if the market stays elevated and maybe we see a sell-off on Christmas Eve and catch everyone off guard. I don't know. That's what I'm thinking in my head. That maybe this year we will see the opposite. They will, instead of selling off with a bounce on Christmas Eve, that we'll sell off on Christmas Eve. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But before I get into the list of tickers I have, which is like every week, it seems to be a lot, but oh well. We have the VIX on the daily on the left and the weekly on the right, and I just want to point out that the VIX is getting into the territory where it wants to bounce, which is under 12. The last week, this is the last week's weekly candle right here, which is like a little hammer, and a hammer here, and it popped the next week. So maybe VIX could possibly pop this week. If it does, the market will sell off. So just be wary that the VIX is in bounce territory, which means the market could drop. So just keep that in mind. And we can bring up SPY real quick before we start getting into the list. I mean, it's got like a rising wedge right here. But the thing I want to point out is that on the weekly, every time SPY on the weekly candle gets outside the Keltner channel, it drops. So it gets out, drops, out, drops, out, drops, touches, drops. Right here, it started to, but it couldn't. But it's outside the candle. The full candle is outside of the weekly Keltner channel. So I wouldn't be a bit surprised if this week or next week, well, I should say in the next 2 weeks, that we see a sharp sell-off and we end up getting below the 310 area on SPY. So I'd be very cautious about being long SPY, any SPY calls, because it's at all-time highs and the weekly is pretty extended. So I would be very cautious. So with that said, we'll get into the watch list. And if you're not in my Discord room, make sure that you are. You definitely don't want to miss plays. We've been having some really good plays. Friday was a pretty decent day. I've been having a pretty good run over the last couple of months and been having a really high win rate. So you definitely want to take advantage when everything's going well. So you definitely should be in the room. And if you don't know how to get into the Discord room, the link will be in the description. So that's how you know how to get there. Okay, with that said, we'll get with Disney. Disney is on the bullish side. I know it's got a weekly head and shoulders. I've been preaching that for a couple weeks. I mean, it gets below the 145. It's over with for Disney. It's going to go down to 140. Probably even go down here and retest the gap support, which is down in the 136 area. But Star Wars came out, had good numbers apparently. So I was just reading it. It did like 146 million in the US or something, and 300 something in the worldwide or what, I don't know. I just looked quickly. The numbers were pretty good, but we'll see how Disney reacts to it. We'll see if it gets positive reaction out of it. And if it does get positive reaction out of over 148, we can see it get into the 150, even the 152. But I'm kind of like skeptical of it because Frozen did really good numbers and Disney didn't care, and then Apptopia had some good numbers and Disney didn't care, and it just went sideways and dropped. So we'll see if Star Wars has the same kind of response, that it just doesn't care, and just maybe possibly it does, the head and shoulders does play out and it dumps down into the 140. So Disney is very, very iffy. I mean, you get the 14 SMA right here curling down on the daily. So, and on the hourly, where are you? Yeah, it's getting at the bottom of the 4 hour. So yeah, it's somewhat like a descending triangle right here inside of the head and shoulders. So I'd be very cautious about Disney. It's all going to be based on the reaction to Star Wars. So, like I said, over 148, get to 150, 151, below 145, it's going to, the head and shoulders is going to play out, and it's going to drop down to 140. So, the other one I have is FedEx. This one's been getting hammered because of the earnings, but it's getting down here in support right here, the 146. So if it can get over this 149 area right in here, top of this candle, that we could see it make a run for the 152 area for a gap resistance retest, and if it does get up in this area, I don't think it's going to go up over it. I would, especially if the market's weak, FedEx isn't gonna get there. So FedEx could possibly bounce small, and that's what I'd be looking for on that. Netflix. Now Netflix, I mean, I think this is overextended. I think it's gonna have to pull back. I mean, look how overextended it is on the hourly. I mean, I would like to see this pull back to probably at least the 320. I mean, but the thing that catches my attention on Netflix is the weekly. I mean, the weekly is right here. Look at this strong weekly candle right here. I mean, and the last time I had a big candle like that, it had another candle just like it the following week. So if the market is not weak and the market's still raging strong, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if we have a little bit of continuation. But on Friday, I shorted it right here the third time. And the third time I shorted it, I got burned because I shorted at the gap resistance. And usually when you're getting gap resistance, it pulls back. So Netflix is going to be another one that's going to be a 50-50. I mean, it gets over this 340 area, it's probably going to rip and fill the gap. And I wouldn't be a bit surprised if the market's strong this week, it does fill the gap this week. But if it doesn't get over the 340 and it stays below like 330, it's gonna drop and pull back down to the under the 320. So Netflix is really a crapshoot. You don't really know if it's going to continue or not, but I do like it either way. I prefer it to pull back, but that weekly continuance candle could suggest that it could fill the gap. So got to keep that in mind on Netflix. Now Home Depot. Now Home Depot is had a strong week. Now it did come up and retest this 30 SMA. So I mean, it could pull back before rocketing up. And in fact, the hourly is showing a little bit of a divergence right here, and the RVI right there. So you gotta be worried about the slight. It's very tiny. I mean, the divergence is really not that big. It's slightly, but the fact that it's come up and touched this SMA, it could pull back down to, it could pull back down to the 218, even as far as the 216 before it bounces and comes back up. So there is a slight divergence on Home Depot. I wouldn't jump right in, but if it does something to pull back, this might be one that's good to buy the dip on Home Depot. As you can see here on the weekly. The weekly, it shows, it's oversold on the stochastics. I mean, it's due for a big run. So if it can get over those levels, it's definitely got a chance. I mean, it closed on the weekly right at the middle kill, which is the 20 EMA on the weekly. So, and usually when it closes right at it, underneath it, like down right here, it likes to pop up over it. So if it can cross this EMA on the weekly, that it will have a strong bounce, because it did it right here too. So Home Depot, definitely liking that one. Roku. Now Roku is still on this trend line on the daily. Well, 1 hour, 4 hour daily. It's still right on this trend line right here. So as long as this holds, it could bounce. But if it doesn't hold, I mean, under 130.34, I mean, this has got room to under 130. Could retest this 128 area again right here, down at the bottom of the lower celt. And if it does manage to break that, I mean, I think that it's got room down here into the 120 area. Right here is a lot of support, but it needs to hold this trend line. If it can hold this trend line and get up over the 140, it's going to have a strong pop up into the 150. So I would like to see Roku get off this trend line and pop. But we'll have to see if it's actually can do it or not. So I might even grab it over the 138, definitely over the 140. So Roku is definitely one to watch for a bounce off the trend line. Now Shaq. I know Shaq has been going crazy last week, and I know some people in the room called it and did pretty well with it. But the thing that caught my interest, I mean, it's overbought on the 4 hour and the 1 hour, so it could pull back to like the 160 area and retest the breakout area. The thing that caught my attention though on this one is the weekly. I mean, look at the weekly right here. It's, you know, chopping right in this little area, and every time it chops in this in the area right here, it broke out. So I would watch every time this like chops for a few weeks. I mean, look at this strong candle right here. It went from $57 to 63. So I mean, that's a $6 move in a week. So that's pretty good. So I mean, if it gets over this 62, let's say 62. What was the high for this candle, this weekly candle? 62, 65. If it gets over that high of this candle, I think it's got room to 65, possibly even up to the 69 area. So Shaq, you should watch. I think the weekly chart is a lot more substantial than the lower time frames. But like I said, it could pull back to the 60. But if it does clear this, I would definitely think about it again. Now on the bearish side of things, I have a lot that's on here, and if the market is weak, you're gonna be able to pick and choose what you want. And you know, Johnson & Johnson is one of them. I mean, it's just on a tear. I'll bring up the weekly right here. This is what's got my attention. Every time it gets outside this Keltner channel in this area, 147.50, it likes to dump. So, and plus it's got like a doji on the daily right here. So I would be looking for a short under, you know, the 145 and possibly pull back down to the 140. I think Johnson & Johnson's way overbought. It's gonna pull back. So we'll see what happens on that. So I definitely will be looking for Johnson & Johnson to pull back. I mean, look at this. This is just straight up. I mean, look how far away it is from the moving averages outside the Kelt. I mean, every time it gets that far outside the Keltner channel, it likes to pull back. So the middle Kelt's right at the 140 area. So that's a good area for it to pull back to. And that's what I'll be looking for. Target is another one. This thing has just been going crazy. And it's got a divergence going on too. So right here, higher high, and the MACD's going lower, RSI is going lower, stochastic's going lower. When I see a divergence on all three indicators, I mean that's pretty high probable. I don't like going off. I mean, I do sometimes go off divergences just off one indicator, but when you see them on multiple indicators, and I think that it's got a higher probability of tanking. So target is going to be another one under the 128.48 area. Well, 128.50. Gets below that, I would like to see it come down to 125 and even possibly come down here and test the 122 gap support again. So target is definitely going to be one to watch. URI, this thing has just been going on another tear. I'm not too, my lines are terrible on this. Oh, it's because I have them on the daily. Okay. URI is just a rising wedge. I mean, it's just every time it starts to get a little bit of weakness, it bounces. So I don't know. We'll see if this is getting can pull back or not. I'm not gonna be too worried about it if it doesn't, because this one is not one I play too often. But you know, right in here, you get into the 170 area, it gets rejected harsh. So Weekly's suggesting that it's overbought, but we'll keep an eye on that on a rising wedge on the weekly. I mean, look, straight up, it came back. I mean, every time there's a rising wedge like this, it just gets rejected. So we'll be watching for that on URI. Lululemon. Now this one had a big pop on Friday. It filled the gap. No, there was no gap to fill, sorry. Let's bring it up on this time frame. Yeah, well, it's showing a gap on the hourly. So, yeah, I'm not quite sure about this one. I'm not quite sure why I have it on my watch list. It might be because it's just overbought on the hourly. It came up on my over hourly scanner. So maybe, you know, if it gets underneath the 229 area, it could pull back down to the this area right here, which is the 225 area. But I'm not going to pay too much attention to Lululemon because every time it pulls back a little bit, it pops. So it did come back and test the 30 EMA right in here a little bit, bounced off the middle Kelt. I mean, it could go back up to the 235. So, you know, I'd almost like this for a long instead of a short on Lululemon because it did bounce off the middle Kelt, well, the 20 EMA right there bounced and it popped up, it broke out. So, you know, the hourly, let's get some inside candles right here, and it's overbought on the hourly, but if it does pull back a little bit, it could pop back up. So I would almost, you know, take this off the short list and probably put on the bullish side for Lululemon. So that's what I'll probably end up doing after reviewing that again. Sometimes I just take a quick look and then I end up taking a second look at it and I end up changing perspective. So when I definitely be looking at this one for a reversal because every time it gets into this 140 area, it gets rejected. I mean, right there, it got rejected. So I would be looking for this to get rejected and come back down here to the 130 area. The hourly is overextended, 4 hour daily. Let's look at the weekly. The weekly, yeah, look right here. I mean, rejected. And we got over it right here for a couple weeks and it got rejected hard. So, but it did have a symmetrical triangle right here on the weekly, and that's why it broke out. We'll have to see if it can hold, and if it falls apart underneath the 137, definitely going to be shorting this to the 130. So that's what I'm looking at for win. And let's see, does have any divergence going on right here? Yeah, it did right here on the hourly. You can see it right there, right there, right there. And yeah, see right here on the RSI, the RSI right here is over 70. And the last time it was over 70, it dropped. So let's see what the RSI is on the weekly. Oh, I don't have it on that one. I'll just change it on this one right here. Yeah, it's 63. It's not that high. But yeah, I used to have extreme levels on RSI, but Win is not this stock anymore. Win is. I gotta change the time frame. I don't want to see it that far out. 6 months is fine. Okay, so that is Win. That's what I'm looking for underneath the 137 for a pullback down to the at least the fill this gap 135. Maybe even down to the 130 area. So that's what I'm looking for on Win. Now we have Baidu. This is going to be all dependent on what happens with the China trade deal and stuff like that. I know that there's supposedly a trade deal in place, but that hasn't been signed yet. So until it's signed, I don't believe it. I still think it's crap. I still don't believe any of what's being said about the China trade deal. So, and even if it does get signed, I would be a bit surprised if this thing is a sell the news event. So the weekly, I mean, it looks like the weekly has got like an inverse head and shoulders. You got a left head and right here. I mean, the weekly suggests it could pop, and if it does pop, it could pop to the 160 area. So, you know, and the SMA is crossing over on the weekly. So, but I'm not putting too much weight into the weekly on Baidu. I mean, Baidu is just, I don't think it's got the strength to go unless something happens with China and it can magically just go crazy. But otherwise than that, I mean, I'm seeing a divergence right here on the RVI and the stochastics and on the MACD slightly, and the 4 hours curling, and it's got over 70 on the RSI on the daily. So, and the last time it got over 70, it rejected and retested to 113. So it had a almost like a 12-point drop. So if it does have another 12-point drop, I mean, that's going to end up going to 115. So which would line up to this right here. So that's what I'm looking for on Baidu. We'll see if it plays out. We may not see much action this week. It may be a low volume week, but that doesn't mean anything. Like I said in the beginning of the video, last Christmas week, that it was low volume, and we had the market did a substantial bounce on Christmas Eve. So I mean, that is a day that all the big boys are away, and that the market could just do something crazy and catch everyone off guard, and just leave people scratching their heads like, what the heck just happened? So don't be surprised just because it's a short week and low volume week that something big can't happen, because it can, and it has happened in the past. So just keep that in mind. Lily, well, I mean, look at the daily candle. I mean, a big shooting star, if you want to call it that, or inverted hammer on the 4 hour. So under one, let's see, what is the bottom of this candle right here? 131. Underneath 131, I'll be looking to short to at least fill the gap on Lily down to the 126.50. You get it's showing us oversold on the hourly. I mean, the hourly says it could pop, but I'm not putting too much weight into that. Even if it does pop, I'm not interested. It's too overbought. But I'm looking for a short only. So when I put these together, if it does pop and I'm calling for bear side, that does not mean I'm gonna jump and buy it, because if it's this overextended for me to get on my scanner list, I'm not buying it. So I mean, look at the weekly right here. It did break out on the weekly, but it's outside the Kellner channel. I think it's gonna come down and at least fill this gap right here in the 120, 127 area on Lily. Hope I didn't call it Lululemon. No, I don't think I did. Next one is Facebook. Now Facebook, it's going to be tricky because Facebook is up here into the 207, 208 range where I got harsh rejection. So, I mean, it could have the same thing, and that's what I'm looking for. You get a little bit of a divergence going right here on the RVI and the stochastics, but not really on the MACD, but the MACD's crossing over. So I like seeing divergences on multiple indicators. But now the other thing you got to keep in mind is, even though it is like double topping right here on the daily, the weekly, it's got like a cup and handle forming on the weekly. So Facebook could break out, and could break out substantially if it breaks over these levels right here, which is the 207, break out over 207. I mean, it could pop up and retest the 218. So I'd be very cautious about this, but I'm leaning towards the downside. We'll see if that happens, and if it does get like below, underneath, let's see what the hourly is. If it gets underneath the 205 area, I'll be looking to short and fill the gap down here to 198, below 200, or at least the 200 area, the gap support. So yeah, that's 200. What's the low of this candle? $200.09. So yeah, 200 level is pretty big. So that's what I'd be looking for on that. I don't really want to buy the breakout on Facebook, especially on a short week. So I'll be looking for a double top short on Facebook. Triple M, there's another one. This one is just, it's got like another possible, cup and handle right here well, inverted head and shoulders right here. It's got a couple of formations going, but I don't really want to buy it going up. I think M&M, Triple M's a crap stock. I don't like it. So I like shorting it. And let's see what the weekly looks like first. Yeah, see down here. Let's get like an inverted head and shoulders on the weekly if you want to. Not the cleanest looking, but it's there. So I don't know. I'm not. Every time it gets to the daily top of the Kelly channel, it gets rejected. I mean, there. So I'll look for a pullback. And if it does break out, I'm not interested. Doesn't meet my criteria. So Apple, which we had a very good play on Friday. And I think that if the market gets weak and Apple gets under the 278.50, we'll be looking to short that and possibly right around the 269 area for a rebound. Not rebound, sorry. Support. Meaning this support right here at 271. So yeah, fill the gap first, then 271, in the 269 area, 269, 268. And the daily moving averages are kind of like flattening out. And you get like a right here, you see a divergence going on with the RRVI and stochastics and stuff. And the 4 hours curling down, the MACD's curling down, and you get divergence right here in the RSI. So you get, same here on the daily. That's going up, going down, down. It's kind of flat. Let's see what the weekly looks like. See, when you look at the weekly, I mean, that's just ridiculous. That's just straight up. I mean, Apple's got to come back to reality a little bit. I mean, look how far outside the Keltner channel is. It's been outside the Keltner channel for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 weeks outside the Keltner channel. Is that the most it's ever done that? Let's look at that. Time frame. Let's go 10 years. Oh boy, I can't see all that. Yeah, see 1, 2, 3, and okay, we got. See right here, I had the same kind of deal. It ran outside the Keltner channel for a long time. That it just had a massive pullback. I mean, it doesn't look massive, but from 153 to 141, it's a 10-point pullback. The last time it was that extreme outside the Keltner channel. Right here, same thing. Came back, retested the middle. So when it has a long extreme of going outside the Keltner channel for that long period of time, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We said 10. Let's look back here. 1, 2, 3. See, this is going out more than 10, but that's why we're going to keep this on watch. But if it does get below that this level right here, the 277 level and collapse. I mean, it's been bouncing off the middle Kelt, so we are looking for 245. If it does stay consistent with history, when it gets that extreme outside the Keltner channel, let's see right there, test the middle Kelt. Where's the other extreme one? Right there, middle Kelt, bounced right up off it on the weekly. I know this is weekly, so it's going to take a while. It's going to take a couple weeks, but still. That is what I'd be looking for on Apple. Underneath this 278.50, fill the gap, come down here and test the 272. 270. Yep. That's what I'm looking for in Apple. And the last one, I mean, I am not touching this stock because I hate this stock because it's Tesla, but I know people like it, so I'll just Tesla. I think it's going to come down, and I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that, but I don't care. I think it's going to come down. It gets under 400. This thing's going to collapse and go down to 370. I know that sounds extreme. Not even the 370. Did I say 370? I think that we'll get down to 380. 380. Under 400, this thing goes to 380. I gotta get out of this weekly time frames too much. think I had it on 2 years. Yeah, I mean, look at, it's just bananas how strong Tesla is. I mean, it's got such a strong divergence going on right here. Let's bring it up on the other one. I mean, it's just, the RSI is pretty much peaking out again into above the 80s. And it does have a divergence going on right here on the MACD. Not really too much on the RSI. It's kind of flat. So, but I mean, look how overextended it is in the 4 hour and the hourly. I mean, I think under 400 it goes to the 380. So that's my take on Tesla. And I know I've been rambling a lot during this watch list, but a lot of this stuff, there's a lot of extremes going on to the short side. So I mean, one of these days, they're gonna pay off really well. So I think that it could be this week, maybe next week. Depends on what happens this week. So that's it for the watch list. Hopefully this has been helpful. Put some tickers on your mind and just write down the levels, make alerts, and see how this week plays out. Not quite sure how it's going to play out because of the short week and possibly low volume. So have a good week. We'll see how it ends up. Thanks.